Welcome. It's fantastic to see you all here today, particularly our distinguished panelists, and also an audience with many different organizations represented and many different institutions, which I can see in the room today. So thank you very much for joining us, many from a long distance. Some housekeeping. If you could please keep your phones on silent for the session, that'd be very much appreciated. Emergency exits, well, we only have 2 emergency exits here, but if you go out of that door, turn left, down the hall, you'll be free. And the meeting point is outside of the Eurostar terminal under the railway bridge. As you can see, with all of the technologists here in the room, we're recording it and we're streaming it. If you don't want to appear in the recording and the streaming, then please let a member of the Jusoor team know, and we'll seat you in an appropriate place where you don't need to appear on camera. First of all, please let me thank the Asfari Foundation for their support in this overall process, represented here by many of the team, including their CEO, Muna Abbas. Thank you very much, Muna, and your chairman, Ayman Asfari. We wouldn't be here without you today. The objectives of the panel are there, and for me, the most important one of these is very much what we're doing today. It's that concept of collaboration, partnership, engagement, where we can continue along this transformative process together and move forward the process towards liberating education and supporting opportunities for employment for Syrian refugees, as well as other community members in Lebanon and other crisis contexts. So we're thrilled to be a part of the, just one second. So we're thrilled to be a part of the Brussels VII process. As you know, we were invited to be on the official schedule of Brussels VII. It's the first time that Jusoor had that opportunity, and we thank the EU for that invitation. Please allow me just to share a few words on Jusoor. Founded in 2011, since then it's been able to educate and support 12,000 Syrian refugees and other nationalities through our 3 main programs, which is, sorry, go back one slide, sorry. The name Jusoor is interesting. Bridges in Arabic, for many of you in the room that speak Arabic, with the mission of maximizing the potential of Syrian youth through education. It's important for us to say, and we say this very often, that Jusoor is a non-political organization with strictly no ties to any political affiliation. If you could flick on to the next slide. So our 3 core programs of refugee education, where we have 8 centers across Lebanon, providing more than 2,000 children a quality education each year. Our university scholarships, where we've reached, I believe the latest number is 354 scholarships around the world at some of the top universities, Harvard, Oxford, and some of the top universities in the region, AUB, LAU, and also Jordanian universities. We've supported 509 startups across 4 countries in the region, and we very much like to grow the entrepreneurship program and other programs as well. Our final and most recent program is the career development program, where we've been providing mentorship and remote job opportunities, which you might hear a little bit more about today. I'd just like to express a couple of things on the Jusoor team. We're here today with our original academic director, Suha Tutnji, who is the head of our refugee education program, and she'll be on the panel with me later on. Suha, at the end of last year, was awarded the Amnesty International Janetta Sagan Award for humanitarian efforts on the front line providing education since 2011. So Suha, congratulations, and we can't think of someone any better that can receive that award, and we're thrilled for you. I'd also like to say for the beginning of 2023 is Dr. Alexandra Chen, who is here today, one of our trustees and also our interim executive director, for her receiving the Harvard Foundation Insignia Award for outstanding contributions to intercultural race relations. Congratulations, Alexandra, that's a fantastic achievement. My last 2 points are, well, it's 1 point really, focused on the Future Skills Program, which you're going to be hearing quite a lot about today. Catherine, my colleague here, Catherine Stevenson, will be presenting a research paper after the halftime break, and she will be talking to us about various elements within the Future Skills program, again supported by the Asfari Foundation, powered by the Code Brave curriculum. Thank you very much, Clementine, for supporting us with that, at our Beirut Center, and also our iconic tented school at the Jurahia camp in West Bekaa. If you haven't visited yet, I really suggest that you take a trip out to Lebanon and join us on a trip to the West Bekaa. Lara, please join us. It would be fantastic. Future skills focus on three main elements: coding and robotics, English language skills, as well as other softer skills, problem solving and critical thinking. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Alexandra Chen, who is our trauma psychologist, UN advisor, and as I said, a trustee and our interim executive director. Alexandra?
And may I invite Yannick, a Pont, as well as Ameer to come and join for the first panel. If gentlemen you'd like to be here, Yannick, that would be fantastic, and Ameer as well. Yes. Right next to Yannick on that side, if that's okay. Sven, are we still visible on the screen with both of them seated? Thank you. I would actually like to start first, not just only by thanking Richard and the fantastic team who are here, and just excitement to know all the brains and hearts in the room who are equally passionate about this incredibly important topic, but also the team, the tech team, who behind us know collectively more than I will ever know in life about technology, as well as those who are behind the scenes, our team in Lebanon, Turkey, and many other places supporting this work. So, as many of you know, the issue of unemployment for youth in the Middle East is quite a big one, and one that has only increased, unfortunately, over the years. And as one has been complicated by economic collapse, particularly in Lebanon, which is the case study that we have today, as well as the various issues of displacement and many legal and infrastructural barriers that are in place as well. I am joined today here by extraordinary, inspirational, and incredibly humble people who I get the honor of introducing, because otherwise I think they would be too modest to tell you all that they do and endeavor to on behalf of the youth who are affected. But essentially, our goal here together is to secure decent work, defined by the IOM as the aspirations of people in their working lives, and particularly an opportunity to do productive work that brings in a fair income, that provides security and protection for all, an opportunity for personal development, freedom of expression, as well as a gender equality. With that, we have today Yannick and Ameer here in person, as well as we will have Naeem and Neal. Naeem from Beirut, as well as Neal from San Francisco. Naeem could not join because he wasn't granted a visa on time, which the irony of which I think we can all appreciate. Neal from San Francisco with little children, but she has an extraordinary presentation for us. And Rania, who is our co-founder and the CEO of Mailchimp. She unfortunately could not be here today because she spent 16 hours trying to get on a Eurostar train and then a plane that did not unfortunately arrive, but she sends her apologies and she's very much with us in spirit. So with that, I think before we start perhaps sharing a little bit of the analysis of reasons that I think we all collectively know for the labour market mismatch, if you will, because there is often the assumption there's often the assumption that there are no jobs, but that's not true. And the data shows that 87% of employers, particularly in private sector, are not able to find the talent that they need. And so why this mismatch? And as you'll hear, particularly from Naeem today, there are many, many opportunities for us to fix this. Among them are obviously the local education curriculum, not just in Lebanon and not even just in the region. Many would argue also around the world. The second, language barriers, particularly English being a language barrier for many, and particularly in certain jobs abroad. Legal barriers, plenty, particularly for refugees who are not allowed to legally work in many, if not all, occupations. The financial infrastructure. How do you pay a young person who is working extremely hard and doing everything to advance your business or your endeavor? That is a code to crack, and if anyone can, you get a gold star from me. But then there's also exposure to employers. There are talent that do exist, but just don't have that connection, as well as technological demands, both on the system, such as internet, that we take for granted, and then finally a soft skills gap with sometimes perhaps the over-focus on digital skills. But with that, there also are the risks of youth unemployment. I think that many of us are incredibly aware of. I am biased because I'm a psychologist and I do trauma therapy for refugee children and their families, but youth mental health is just one of the many risks if there are children who continue and youth who continue to not find meaning, purpose, mentorship, growth, excitement, and also the ability to provide as they get older. Finally, the objectives of this particular panel is I'm excited to learn, and hopefully you are all with me to get an analysis of the barriers as well as the solutions. We have some very exciting ones, especially from Yannick and from Ameer, we'll hear. Some of the gaps and ongoing challenges, as well as an opportunity for collaborative problem solving. And so we will start with Yannick, who will forgive me, I hope, if I mispronounce any Dutch words on your bio. Yannick is a heavy hitter, if I must say, in the field of humanitarian aid, in many ways, not just because he's been working on development of fragile states since 1994 and has worked with the Dutch government as well, the Dutch Labour Party, foundations such as Vermeer, and has had the experience of being a researcher to evaluate the performance of OSCE mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2000 and 2001. But also because he is very, very much at the front line of trying to evoke much needed change in a rather old system, I think, of development and also humanitarian aid. In that, Yannick is experienced in initiating developments and working in high-risk environments. He also serves pro bono on multiple boards, such as the board of the Max van der Stoel, yes, a foundation in Amsterdam, the Center of Theory of Change in New York, and the DHAD International Humanitarian Conference and Exhibition in Dubai. He has a master's in international relations and sociology from the University of Amsterdam. Yannick.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, Max van der Stoel was the most legendary foreign minister of the Netherlands, not just because he's a social democrat, but he was during the end of the Cold War on the forefront of democratization, supporting democratization movements in Eastern Europe. And so if you go to many East European countries, you go to Prague, you go to the Baltics, you go to Poland, they're huge fans of his activism within Europe to bring them in. On Spark, really brief. It's now 29 years ago that we started. It was in Tuzla, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I think the first trigger was to help from University of Amsterdam fellow students in Tuzla.
For almost 20 years, Spark and the European Union have been working to support skills development and create jobs for youth in Europe's neighbouring countries. For young men and women, refugees and IDPs, the opportunity to gain market-leading skills allows them to take the first steps in their career paths. Similarly, for entrepreneurs, business skills help them to grow, creating more job opportunities for young people. We've supported 3,750 youth to acquire much-needed technical and soft skills to prepare them for the job market. With local partners and the private sector, over 400 youth,
that later morphed
including
into more
women and
support to
refugees,
job creation.
have been placed in jobs and internships throughout the EU's neighbouring countries. 118 innovative and unique startups have been supported to scale up their business and create better jobs.
So I'm very happy. So when often people
Together
say,
with the EU, we create better jobs for young people.
We're actually not doing a great job because it's other organizations doing a great job, like Jusoor, Bina, Zamzam. I can make a whole list of groups that are passionate and professional, that originate from the communities and that design their own solutions to the problems that then we try to advocate for. And since you referred to the 8 system. After 29 years, I think it's really up for some changes, particularly in the area of localization, getting more aid directly to people. I mean, why can you order an Uber, with one click? And why do I need to go to 7 layers from the Dutch taxpayer to the beneficiary, with all kinds of gatekeeping, political structures that siphon off maybe 80%, 90% of the money before it hits the ground. So I think that is, so I think we're also ready there politically, but also with groups like Jusoor, ready to start breaking into that logic with this type of programming.
And so, Yannick, 2 more questions before I go to our next speaker, which is one, how do you think we got here in terms of youth unemployment? And this, I think this extremity of the issue, particularly in the Middle East, which you know very well. And the others, what do you think will take for the humanitarian aid sector to shift from cash programming, for instance, and concerning survival skills in survival provision versus allowing for survival empowerment, if I will?
Well, for the unemployment, I'm not sure if I'm the best expert. Why we got there. We did notice that, and that's also shifted a bit in our programming, that I think the governance in these states is usually where you need to start looking at. So governance of education institutions, policies I think very much limit growth or prevent or help growth. So I think the underlying root causes are deeper than just what we can fix with great programming. What I think what a great programming can do and how to get out of it is to start building really good solutions and just do it and showcase it. Like the roadshow, which has been growing year after year after year. And at some point people start noticing. And I think the moment where we would need to end up with, and that happened in a few cases, I must admit. For example, I will give you another case, and I hope also on job creation we could get there, is that in Iraqi Kurdistan, Syrian Kurdish students could not get into regular university until 6 years ago or so. And I remember having meetings with 7 Kurdish parties, Syrian Kurdish parties. They have the Kurdish National Council, yes. I think by now they're probably 25 or something, or 50. They're proliferating. But they were uniting on a couple of things, and one was that the kids have to get into university. So we would listen to them, we heard the problems. We went to the ministry in Erbil, and there was this pile, literally, like applications sitting. And at the end, by doing scholarships, a couple with Dutch funding, at some point we went to the rectors, which brought some of these kids, and the rector started crying. He started crying because he'd been in Iran, a refugee, and then he saw it worked. He said, you know what? I'm going to do it. 200 places. I'll fight with my minister. I will adopt 200. But you need to get the other one, rector, that rector. And then the community, but again, community started mobilizing with a small project. And then now, there is actually what they call parallel programs, state adopted. So these students can now go through a system to get into university. And then you change the system. So I think that's also what I expect will happen with a lot of your work with Jusoor, that at some point clever politicians in the region will just take it as an example of what they can make into policy. And then let them shine in front of the TV and claim the success. So it will just amplify nationally.
Thank you so much, Yannick. I think the proof is in the pudding, so got lots of pudding to make. No pressure. Thank you, Yannick. We'll turn now, and I hope no one minds if I stay seated for this, but we'll have our second speaker, who's Naeem Sayes. He's an advisor at Talent Beyond Boundaries, and he'll tell you what TBB does. But Naeem is an extraordinary young man. He is a Palestinian from Syria who currently lives in Beirut, and he's the one who didn't get the visa, not yet at least. But he is a business development and digital marketing specialist. He has got over 3 years of experience in growth-driven startups and a focus on tech and recruitment industries in particular. At TBB, he led the communications and growth strategies of the talent catalog, something that he'll also explain in his presentation, but essentially connecting employers facing talent shortages with skilled refugees globally. And Naeem is also a consultant with a focus on the MENA region. He's advised founders, CEOs, and VCs, has worked with entrepreneurs from various backgrounds, and has contributed to various publications as well. Ultimately, Naeem is a problem solver at heart. He's extraordinarily articulate and enjoys connecting the dots, between team objectives and solutions. He's noted for his project management skills and ability to find the optimal software solutions to business problems of all sizes. So I will let Naeem challenge you in his own words.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is Naeem Sayes, and I work with Talent Beyond Boundaries. As a young person growing up in the Levant region, I witnessed firsthand the massive potential that the region has to offer, but also the challenges that it's presented with, especially for the youth and those from marginalized backgrounds. And so, 3 years ago, I joined Talent Beyond Boundaries, or TBB for short, where I've been working with a team to enable refugees to access international employment. Our model is simple. We believe that refugees, like everyone else, should be able to move internationally for work and should be looked at as resources, not as a burden. As you all know, employers globally are facing acute talent shortages. And at the same time, there are millions of refugees and forcibly displaced individuals around the world, many of whom are of working age. TBB exists to bridge the gap between the two, employers and skilled refugees, leveraging bespoke visa schemes that we've developed with world governments to create safe and legal labor mobility pathways for refugees. These pathways work by removing the barriers that refugees typically face when accessing international employment, such as high professional experience and language requirements, application fees, long processing times, and so on. Operationally, we rely on technology. We use the Talent Catalog, which is a platform that we've developed that refugees can use to declare their skills and register their interest in international employment. Think of it as LinkedIn for refugees. To date, the Talent Catalog has over 65,000 registered skilled refugees from all walks of life. And until now, we've helped more than 1,000 refugees access a durable solution by relying on their skills. Our pathways allow refugees to move to work in countries like Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Portugal, and Belgium, where we are here today. Of course, our work comes with challenges, and I want to share some of those with you today. I've divided them into 3 categories. The first one is legal barriers. Most of our candidates live in countries where they have no legal working rights, which leaves them unemployed or victim to the illegal job market. This means that their experiences may not be verifiable or might be below their qualifications, which limits their prospects for international employment. Some of our candidates lack identification documents, which could prevent them from applying for visas or sitting for language tests. We've mitigated this by working with governments to issue single journey travel documents and with language test providers to provide exemptions for examination, although the latter is sometimes on a case-by-case basis. Another example is when candidates are ready to travel. Many times they are faced with complicated and costly exit procedures. We work with partners such as the IOM and host country governments to help candidates in this regard. The second category is outreach barriers. In a research we conducted with the Durable Solutions platform, we found that 73% of refugees in Lebanon and Jordan didn't know about labor mobility as an option, and almost half assumed immediate ineligibility. When we gave them more information about the pathways, 96% were strongly interested in accessing these routes, and some respondents said they were less likely to consider irregular migration routes. The point I'm alluding to here is that there is not enough information publicly available about labor mobility pathways, and that is why we work with NGO partners to raise awareness, not only in Lebanon and Jordan, but also in a number of other countries where we work. In fact, one of the projects we're currently working on is the creation of a refugee referral network among NGOs to support the identification of skilled refugees. The third category has to do with recruitment barriers and capacity building. Many times our candidates correspond well to the job requirements, but lack the needed English skills. We partner with capacity building providers when this happens, but this usually means longer waiting periods for candidates and employers, which is of course not ideal. Sometimes candidates possess the needed experience, but only in the form of unpaid and internship experience, usually for entry-level positions. But this kind of experience is sometimes not recognized. So while these barriers continue to exist today, I must say that tremendous progress has been made through advocacy and pilots that prove that removing these barriers is in the benefit of all stakeholders. And also through partnering with other organizations to resolve challenging aspects of labor mobility for refugees. Lastly, I want to briefly touch upon the perspective of refugee communities, the communities that we work with. And this is my favorite part of the job. It's hearing candidates say things like, and I quote here, "I'm happy to be recognized for my skills. I am excited to resume my career. I can dream again." The power of this solution is the autonomy that it gives refugees. Our candidates can negotiate or reject job offers, although the latter doesn't usually happen. Our candidates also recognize what's needed on their part to secure an opportunity, so they utilize our English training resources, and they seek access to vocational trainings that are aligned with in-demand positions in third countries. And we're continuously working with capacity building partners to help us in this regard. In terms of occupations, we work with candidates from every background, from nurses and engineers to bakers and football players, so it is hard to say which occupations are a good fit for our programs. But I can say for sure that our work follows labor market demand in the destination countries. And there are many variables that come into this. But with every occupation, having a functional level of spoken English or French is almost always a determining factor. It's also important to highlight the limitations here. This solution is a complementary solution to traditional humanitarian resettlement and not a replacement, and therefore may not be suitable for everyone who comes from a refugee background. Additionally, we want to keep the process as close to a regular recruitment process as possible. This is important for employers to realize the benefits of the program and avoid thinking of it as a charity. So, my message to you today is please consider how labor mobility can contribute to the work you're already doing and vice versa. And please reach out if you think we can work together to scale the solution. I'm happy to take your questions in a bit, and thank you.
Thank you, Naeem. He's online and he will be joining us for Q&A, so you can pepper him then. Our next speaker will also be joining us online, but she is Neal El-Jor Taouk. She is the executive director and co-founder of Jobs for Lebanon. So hers is also a solution-oriented, she leads a solution-oriented platform for not just refugee youth, but also for those affected, Lebanese youth who are affected. Neal herself is a social entrepreneur. She has, through Jobs for Lebanon, reached over 20,000 candidates, over 6,000 job opportunities posted, and over 1,000 individuals connected to opportunities. She herself is incredibly passionate, is driven by social impact, and inspired by people with a heart for a cause. Neal has really dedicated her career to turning Jobs for Lebanon into the go-to platform for every Lebanese talent looking for economic opportunities. But she also empowers in many ways Lebanese diaspora to make a difference in a crisis that can otherwise feel completely uncrackable. And so the platform connects not only employers in the diaspora to Lebanese candidates and beyond, but it generates programs that equip talents with the tools that they need to become career ready. Prior to JFL, Neal was part of the Bay Area tech scene, working for companies like Facebook, Nextdoor, and a few other startups. And she holds a master's degree in international marketing and an undergraduate degree in psychology from LAU. She's also a certified master coach. So Neal will speak to us also on the screen.
Hello, my name is Neal El-Jor Taouk, and I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Jobs for Lebanon. I'd like to start off by thanking you for having me on this panel talk, and also to apologize for not being able to attend in real time. Jobs for Lebanon is a US-registered nonprofit with a vision to become the go-to platform for every Lebanese talent looking for economic opportunities. Our mission is to cultivate an ecosystem, source opportunities, and empower talent. Our story originated as a result of the October events in 2019. Back then, there was a sense of solidarity that spread and reverberated not just across the nation, but across the entire world. And for the first time in its modern history, the Lebanese diaspora showed its true strength. We came together from all corners of the globe to bring an economic solution to a country that was collapsing. As unemployment rates skyrocketed, the question we asked ourselves was, how can we utilize the strength of our diaspora to hire Lebanese talent? In March 2020, we launched a platform that allowed for global employers to post job opportunities and for candidates to browse through these vacancies and apply directly on our website. We called onto the diaspora to offer their job opportunities to Lebanese talent through a viral video campaign. And within 1 week, we found out the first Lebanese person got hired through our platform. To date, we have a database of over 20,000 candidates with 5,000 plus jobs on our platform, and we know of over 2,000 secured opportunities. Over 70% of the jobs on our platform can be done remotely, with the majority of them being full-time positions. And as of June 2022, 69% of jobs pay in foreign currencies. We've also offered more than 500 fresh graduates access to employability and mentorship programs. Recently, we launched Outsource to Lebanon. Through this initiative, we're on a mission to make Lebanon an outsourcing hub for the world. By connecting accomplished Lebanese service providers in a variety of industries with globally situated companies in need of additional outsourced support, we're not just helping local businesses thrive, we're also playing an important role in reducing the brain drain that the workforce is suffering from. The industries of focus of our outsourcing efforts include customer and IT support, fintech services, software development, marketing and communications, design and creative services, and others. We selected these industries as they are very much aligned with the most in-demand skills, not just in the MENA region, but internationally as well. And we see that through the jobs coming in on our platforms targeted at individuals too. When comparing the most in-demand jobs in the MENA region versus internationally, there's a lot of overlap between the two. This is because the global economy is becoming increasingly digital, and companies are looking for employees with the skills to help them succeed in this new environment. However, there are also some key differences between the two lists. For example, MENA companies are placing a greater emphasis on data analysis and visualization, while international companies are placing a greater emphasis on data science. This is likely due to the fact that MENA companies are still in the early stages of digital transformation, while international companies are further along in this process. They're just more advanced with disruptive technologies. Of course, that creates a skills gap, and which became even more evident following the pandemic, and as growing globalization led to structural shifts in the labor market. Thankfully, a high number of organizations are prioritizing efforts to reduce the skills gap by offering reskilling and upskilling programs and services to the workforce. And that is a great starting point to reduce youth unemployment. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and opinion with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of this panel. Take care.
Thank you, Neal. Our next speaker is here in the flesh, whether he likes it or not. It is very pleased to have Ameer Jawad here, co-founder and CEO of TalPods. Ameer, as you'll hear, is an entrepreneur who's passionate about building solutions for uplifting the livelihoods of people throughout sustainable models. Ameer and his team at TalPods are on a mission to unlock human potential in the MENA's young population. They have cracked the hard problem of bridging fresh grads into the industry, and he'll talk about that special focus of handholding into the economies, into well-paid roles at the MENA's fastest-growing tech companies. Ameer, in all his spare time, is also the managing director of Laymoon, one of MENA's leading career development portals, connecting users to over 40,000 professional courses and job opportunities. Prior to this, his startup career, he was at Thomson Reuters, And Ameer is originally, his family is originally from Iraq, and he graduated from Imperial College London with a bachelor's in engineering and computer engineering, and is currently based in Dubai.
Thank you so much. Okay, can I stand by the podium? Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Do you want me to click for you?
I think, yeah, I'll click if you don't mind. At TalPods, we're a team of entrepreneurs we're passionate about tech, and we're also passionate about nurturing young talent. We noticed that the skill gap in tech was still largely unsolved, in the most effective ways. And so in 2021, we devised our own model to try and do this. And it's an on-the-job apprenticeship model, which I would like to explain how it works through the story of Mahmoud. Mahmoud is a hero who, when we met him, he had already been through, he'd persevered 9 years of challenges as a Syrian refugee in Lebanon. By the time we met him 2 years ago, he was married and he'd started a family, but he was working at a bakery, and the financial crisis has hit, and so what he was earning was the equivalent of $50 a month, which is really nothing to get by. And so he was determined to get into a tech career in order to provide a better life for his family. He worked tirelessly on himself. He worked 20 hours a day between his job and studying. He pursued a computer science degree through a free university. He took on courses through Coursera, courtesy to some Jusoor scholarships, actually. And he completed a boot camp and really prepped himself up to be a solid junior level software engineer. But no one would hire him. 2 problems. In Lebanon, companies, it's illegal for them to hire Syrian software engineers. As for international companies, every company that he would come across, they're looking for mid to senior level engineers. This is a problem not only faced by Syrian refugees, but entry-level software engineers across the board, they face this problem. Companies, generally speaking, fast-growing startups or tech companies, they're looking for talent who can hit the ground running and produce very fast, solving complex problems. That's mid to level senior engineers, and then usually not looking for junior engineers because they require a lot of hand-holding, and to begin with, they are low productivity. A mid-level engineer usually takes about 3+ years of experience, right, through the typical route of industry. Now, that's proficiency that really has to be gained on the job, and so there is no boot camp or course that can simulate this. And so really we have this catch-22 problem because companies are not providing that pathway for this young talent to actually develop to these levels. And so, how did we solve this problem? So our model, our approach is to say, we will growth hack the competency of the talent so that immediately today they will match the standards and productivity of a senior engineer on the job. So how we did this with Mahmoud, for example, we started out with so we're looking at the second column here, right? This is preparation period of 3 months where we trained him up to a minimum standard that we needed him to be, right, before we go into the main phase of the program. And that standard is called an associate engineer. Now we get to the actual main parts of the program, that's the apprenticeship. And enters Callo, right? Callo here is our client, and they are one of the fastest growing food tech companies in the MENA region. They're based in Bahrain. They came to us with an urgent requirement to fill a position for a senior full stack software engineer. Now, what we proposed and what we gave to them is we said, okay, we're going to take Mahmoud, who's an associate engineer, and we're going to pair him up with Hamad, right? Hamad there on that picture, you can see him in the pair with Mahmoud. He is a top lead engineer that is provided by TalPods. He's a full-time member of the TalPods team. He has 8 years experience, and he's an expert in the stack that is used by Callo. The way the model works is that Mahmoud executes full-time for Kalo. And Hamad augments Kalo, spending 1 to 2 hours a day, coaching him intensely on the tasks at hand, enhancing his productivity and also the standard of the code so that it immediately matches the standard of a senior engineer, and he guarantees that before it is actually committed to Kalo. So the formula is Mahmoud plus Hamad as a combined unit is the equivalent of a senior engineer filling that position. So that fills the requirement for Kalo, and therefore Kalo actually pays us for that service. And from there, we pay Mahmoud a 4-digit dollar salary, already giving him that financial breathing space that he needs. Now, there's another thing that is going on which is interesting here, right? Mahmoud is in a unique position now, which no other entry-level engineer would experience, is that he is not being exposed to junior-level work because of the assumed position. He's working on senior-level projects of a much higher degree of complexity, number one. Number two, he is learning from the best on a daily basis by this dedicated mentor. And number three, he is following, under our supervision and under the guidance of Hamad, a talent development structure, right? And so because of these things, this process, which usually takes about 3 years to get to a mid-level engineer, we compress that into 1 year. So it's an accelerated program, right? And so you see 1 year down the line. Now, he started the placement in January of last year. 1 year, just February of this year, Kalo has certified him here as engineer level 2, which is the technical word for a mid-level engineer. Kalo hired him full-time, and they doubled his salary. So now he's actually earning really at the top level of software engineers in general in Lebanon. And he's managed to build a beautiful family which he can provide for comfortably. Now, the great thing about this model is that it solves an intense problem for companies. Flowered is one of the largest e-commerce platforms in MENA. They came to us with an urgent need to fill mid-level engineering positions. This is where they find scarcity of talent in the market. And today, through the same model, we supply 20% of Flower's entire engineering team. As Liat testifies here, he says, through the model, we open the door for more young talent to be come in and be long-term champions in the team, right? So it's a win-win situation. Final slide. We have deployed over 20 engineers from high inflation economies into startups across Middle East and North Africa. And also we have our first client in Silicon Valley as well, so we made a start there. These guys, by the way, as soon as they complete that first year, they're highly viable in the market, high in demand in the market. So we don't have the thousands in our numbers just yet, right? This program is very focused, it's highly tailored. Each individual requires a lot of resources that goes into it. But what we do have is a proven model. And so with the right support, we can really scale this up and transform the lives of many young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ameer. I'm sure many of you have questions. I might have to wait just a little bit longer. So while I still have Ameer, because Ameer is running off to a flight very soon, I'm going to poke a little bit with some questions which we really, I think many of us in the room would be curious to hear. Although we are talking about, in many ways, the higher end of employment, and this is something that we believe that every youth has the right and the prerogative to pursue. The reality currently, if we look at it, is that even if we think about traditional employment, perhaps on the very left, doctors, engineers, where I come from, you're either a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a failure. So, I think that's similar with some Arab parents. But, the reality is, for most of the refugee youth that I know and work with, and I think a lot of us do as well, they are, in these other circles of manual labor, of at best, maybe the service industry, if they even get paid, or are somewhere involved in illegal black market work, even from a very, very young age, sometimes not without even understanding what the consequences are for their futures. And so while a lot of the focus is on the sort of tech digital space, one of my questions for you is, there is a critique, if you will, in the industry, that sometimes we are supporting refugees who are lower middle class and above, and not really reaching those who really need opportunities. And in doing so, as well-meaning as that is, can create this further wealth gap. And so I'm very curious, particularly Yannick, because you've been in this for so many years, what your reflections are on that. And while not everyone can do everything, and that's certainly not the expectation, if you have ideas of what could be done to make decent work accessible to those who are at the bottom, if you will, of the societal, status.
Wow, yeah, that's a very good question. And quite confronting, I think, for some of us. So I remember that we took a first job for scholarships with the Dutch government, because there was a lobby in parliament. There was a Dutch NGO, large one, and they got the minister to promise he would, I love that, they would save Syrians. It was literally called Saving Syrians. That's terrible. So they would make scholarships available in the Netherlands, but they asked for $1 million to manage it, for 20 scholarships. To manage it, yes. So we put a counter proposal, 16,000 euro. Yeah, the management of that NGO is not they're not fans of ours. So of course we got it granted. We put a wonderful Dutch Arabic student, Czech Arabic student in Amsterdam on the program. She ran it flawless, 16,000 versus $1 million. And then the money so we thought, now the money goes to the scholarship holders, but then the universities were saying, yeah, but we need English speakers, we need GMAT test. So the first disappointment was some people from Aleppo region, because they couldn't find a properly functioning GMAT testing center in the devastated outer rims of Aleppo, which were totally carpet bombed. So I remember calling the rector and tried to explain to him that GMAT testing in the outskirts of Aleppo at that moment was not particularly feasible. But no, he had to stick to it. It was important, GMAT and English. So in the end, we got only 13 people to come. I think they were all upper class, because of course they went to private schools, they spoke good English. And I was actually left with the feeling that what we've just done is basically give middle upper class families an extra subsidy they didn't need, honestly. And I think 6 disappeared on arrival. They went to Sweden, applied for asylum, they never took up the scholarship. So that was maybe a bit grim, but then what we did with the scholarships later, and I'll come to your question, is we said, wait, let's do it in the region. Let's do it also in Arabic language, because 95% of Syrian refugees we polled do not speak sufficiently English, particularly not from the big cities. You can fill that in. So I think, so if we've switched, we've diversified, I would say. So we still do programs for high potentials, and those are very often not the poorest of the poor, but those are the people that can create jobs, that have a university education, that maybe have a middle class background, but they can actually create jobs for the others. So we still do that. But I must say that, for example, on scholarship work, we've changed to local language, not only top tier universities, but also universities that are a bit more affordable, so we can do more to try to reach, let's say, more youth that is more vulnerable. So it's now a two-track approach, probably because we can't really choose what is better. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that so much, and of sharing that. Ameer, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't have the expertise that Yannick has on this topic, but what I would share is basically looking at this problem from the lens of a program like ours and kind of reverse engineering it. So, the starting point for our program this is where we're going to bridge talent into industry, right? Now, there has to be a set criteria to begin with of what this talent has, right? They need to be speaking the English language. They need to be strong problem solvers, right? They need to know how to think. And they need to have a good background in computer science fundamentals, right? Now, all of these things require, a very long precedent of education to even get to that level, right? So you need at least, high, up to the level of high school education, right? To have been achieved by this talent, right? Now, if we're looking at trying to tackle the situation for people of more, let's say, impoverished circles, right, and even more so underprivileged, maybe a program like ours can have some kind of oversight or consultative oversight over, okay, what is actually being taught to these children from an early age, with the viewpoint that we're hoping that some of this talent would actually funnel into a program like ours, right? Now, having said that, a very important point is that in order to solve a problem like this, we need many hands to come together, right? First and foremost, for a child to even be effective in terms of developing themselves and all of these skills, we need to make sure that, okay, what's going on in the home of that child, right? Is there food being put on the table, right? Do they have security? Do they have shelter, the basic human needs? Because if these things are missing, then no child has the mindset to be developing and growing. And that's why there needs to be multiple organizations coming together to solve a problem like this. Yeah.
Thanks, Ameer. And I think part of what I hear you saying is that this work needs to start younger.
Absolutely, yes. Right from early ages, that's when you start nurturing and conditioning the brain to think the right way. And I think if we do have some kind of control and influence over what they are learning, apart from the things like logic and mathematics and STEM subjects, which funnel into a lot of great job opportunities, I think there's a lot to kind of teach in terms of even traditional education, I feel, are missing, right? And we can gain the advantage over here, right? Things like instilling a growth mindset, right? And we know statistically that people who are gritty, right? That's the the biggest predictor of success. Moral values as well, right? This is something that we can look into to create just stronger people who have a more maximal probability of success, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ameer. Friends, I would like to announce a miracle because Rania Succar, who is our co-founder and CEO of Mailchimp, has actually made it to the panel after 16, 18 hours of waiting. Train, plane, and plane. So, Rania, if you are up to it, I would love for you to present with us. Rania literally has been trying to get here since about 5 p.m. yesterday. تفضلي. Alhamdulillah, salami.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, I know you do. If you need to go, that's okay. I'll connect you. Yes, so.
All right, guys. Sorry, excuse me, I have to go. Right, I apologize. And
one, we lose one. So.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ameer, for being here.
It's an honor, everybody. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you. So I'll introduce Rania so she can catch her breath and maybe get a glass of water at least. So Rania is in many ways, I think, the firepower of why Jusoor exists. In fact, she is. And she has been, I think, role model for many, many Syrians, and particularly Syrian Americans that I know. We were at Harvard at the same time, but Rania was already in the master's program, and I know many who are in the community, particularly who had left Syria early in the war, who looked towards Rania as a role model. So it has been extraordinary over the last decade to support Jusoor's work in a small way with her at the lead. So Rania is currently the CEO of Mailchimp and VP of QuickBooks Payments and Capital at Intuit. Before that, she was Google's Director of Brand Solutions for North America for 5 years. And before that, she worked for McKinsey in the US and Dubai. And she founded the Harvard Arab Alumni Association in 2001, where at the conference, the annual conference, Jusoor was founded. She has a Harvard MBA, Harvard MPA in International Development, and also a Harvard BA in Economics. And Rania today will be giving us the private sector perspective of what it takes to convince companies, I think, to hire in the Middle East.
Sounds good, Ali. How much time do we have?
You have 7 minutes, but I think everyone is keen to hear what you have to say.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with all of you and to see so many people gathered here with just a passion to make a big difference for people who need us. And frankly, this conflict has been going on for, over a decade now, but the need is more acute than it's ever been. So it's so inspiring to see this group gathered here to exchange ideas and perspectives. I don't know what you've talked about so far, so this may be out of context, but I'll just share a couple of thoughts with all of you. One, this employment problem is just critical. And it's one that I am very passionate about because at the end of the day, you probably have touched on this, but education and employment are so interconnected. You can't get strong employment without a foundational educational system that's strong. And at the same time, if there's no employment available for people who are being educated, there's no purpose. And so you can't actually convince people to continue their work and to continue to study. And so these things are so connected. So I've got a lot of passion to try to solve this one. However, as I know you've talked about, it's one of the hardest, most entrenched problems to think about solving in the Arab world, and in Syria in particular. But all over the Arab world, given the governance challenges that exist in those countries, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of investment opportunities, all of that makes it very hard to think about how you go after the employment problem. But the thing I wanted to start with is what I have found remarkable in my last 12 years working with Jusoor, and then even just seeing the organizations on in this panel. It is amazing how you can take the most entrenched problems that exist in the world today and solve them through bottoms-up initiatives. And so I just wanted to encourage all of you to think about that. And the story of Jusoor very much is consistent with that. So we, in the last decade, as you probably have heard and seen, have been able to educate close to 12,000 young people. And that is just the direct impact of the organization. The indirect impact of the organizations is multiples higher than that because everybody who gets educated then affects other people's lives by pursuing an organization or advocating with a government or going back and creating their own nonprofit. And so the opportunity to make a tremendous difference in something as entrenched as the employment challenge through bottoms-up initiatives is remarkable and tremendous. And so sometimes you can look at these entrenched problems and say, there's nothing we can do, it's hopeless. But we have lived and experienced through Spark, through Jusoor, through all the work of people on this panel, that when individuals get involved, even at a bottoms-up level, you can make a massive difference. So I wanted to start with that. The next thing I'd say is I'd go after this with lots of pragmatic interventions. It's going to be very hard to solve the employment challenge at scale, but pragmatic interventions. So the thing that I always get excited about is connecting the need from organizations in the West or richer countries with talent that exists in poorer countries. And there's some amazing examples of that all were individual founder-led, like Samar, Source, and I think it's called Adana, the one in Africa. I think it's Adana, sorry. My lack of sleep, I'm also jet lagged, and then I've been on planes and trains and sitting in stations. Yes. I think it's Adana, but Adina. But anyway, the point is that these organizations have done remarkable work in terms of going and finding the largest employers around the world who want talent, who need talent, and then training talent, in their cases in Africa, in many cases, where they're training up talent, and then becoming the matchmaker between those who have a demand for jobs and then tremendous talent. And I'd love to see us do something like that in the Arab world, for example. So that's one intervention that I think is an interesting one. Another one is thinking about freelancers and how we support freelancers and strengthen their abilities. There's platforms around the region now, around the world, where freelancers can give their work and get connected. But they need so much help in terms of training, and we need to figure out the payment interventions, and we need to help create the demand for them, and then also create a brand awareness with hire from Lebanon, hire from Syria, hire from Jordan, so people want to bring those freelancers and use them on those platforms. So that's another opportunity. So all of these are basic practical interventions that can make a big difference when it comes to employment, and just starting one at a time can make a big difference. So from the private sector perspective, if you think about large organizations like Intuit, like Mailchimp, we are also very focused right now on hiring people from underserved communities, but it doesn't extend as far as refugee populations, because typically these organizations are very focused on their own home markets. So that would be, in our case, underrepresented communities in the US, for example, where Intuit is very strong, is one example. And so, it's going to be hard to go convince all these large, big organizations to change their focus and go after the refugee problem, for example. But like I said, you can think about all the indirect employment that they're doing through their sourcing or through the partner communities that work with them to strengthen them. So we can go into questions, but those are just some basic thoughts for all of you. One, we can make a massive difference through organizations that we're each a part of and create. And then I would start very practically and pragmatically as opposed to trying to go after things at tremendous scale.
Thank you so much, Rania. Really appreciate you being here. It's still a little surreal. Please feel free to drink water as we ask, I think, our second question. And we're going to get Naeem online as well, Sven, if we can. So Naeem will be joining us live. Hi, Naeem.
Hi, everybody.
Great to have you with us. So my next question is for you and for Rania in a lot of ways. So in Chinese, we have an expression which is yao qin mo de mai, which means you have money, but you cannot buy. So one of my primary questions is for employers, particularly from both your experiences, from both sides. What are the skills and the talents that are being searched for that cannot be, or we feel cannot be found in the labor market?
As you can imagine right now, everything's about AI and generative AI. There's just a lot of demand. It's changing the world in terms of the technology capabilities. So in the tech sector, that's a big deal. And it's totally changing all sorts of jobs and employment. So many jobs can now be replaced by AI. So it's just changing the type of employment and demand that's needed, but we need more data scientists. And then with that comes all the things associated with trust and safety and content moderation. So even just labeling the outputs of generative AI so that can feed back into a model to train a model in terms of the content that people are comfortable with. So it might be something like the labeling or the trust and safety type of work that would be more appropriate for people from the lower income countries, as an example. But AI is definitely a huge area that everyone's trying to hire for right now.
Thanks so much, Rania. Naeem, your thoughts?
What I would add here is what we do is essentially match refugees with employers who need their skills in North America, now in Europe and Australia. And the one thing that we should note about this process is that it starts with employers. They come to us with job descriptions, with the positions they want to fill. So this usually means two things. The first one is this is largely dependent, and I'm echoing Rania here, largely dependent on the size of the company and how much resources they can put into hiring skilled refugees from abroad. Through a trial and error, we've learned that larger corporations who have this incentive to hire refugees, regardless of sector, they're more likely to hire more and be more successful in the process. The second thing is that our work follows the demand of the labor market itself. So aside from AI, which is obviously taking over the world, there's also healthcare, which is one of our biggest programs. It's one of our biggest chunks of candidates who are able to move from Lebanon to the UK to Canada, nurses and healthcare workers who are very much in demand. But there's also the non-tech skills that are needed right now, the vocational skills. We've worked with employers who wanted to hire tailors, cake decorators, anything you can think of. So the point I'm alluding to here is that maybe I'm speaking here on the skilled immigration perspective and how it drives interest from employers. It's easy to get a software engineer to relocate because the requirements are much more straightforward and also easier in most countries because this is an in-demand occupation versus a baker, for example. So what we do is we use this feedback from employers who want to hire skilled refugees, not necessarily in tech, but also in other occupations. We use it to lobby governments to make this process simpler and more straightforward. And that's what we've done over the past 5 years. That's why the pathways that we have exist. On the other side of the equation, where it comes to working with refugees, we try to be purposeful on the education aspect. Now, as an organization, we do the matching, but we outsource some of the education to our partners. And what we do is we go to employers in a country like Canada, and we say, oh, you want 500 truck drivers over the next 3 years. So what we want to do is train those truck drivers on the skills that are needed in the Canadian context, and then put them in the pipeline. So these are my 2 cents, but in the large scheme of things, yes, it is employer-driven, but also employers are part of the solution, and they're the biggest driver of the solution.
Thanks so much, Naeem. I think this is a really important reminder that not everyone can be in a tech job, not everyone wants to be, and not everyone wants to leave either. And I think particularly in the region, for anyone maybe with aging parents or some female candidates may not want to leave home, and so what options are there for them? So thank you for that reminder. Now the audience gets to ask their questions. I believe we may have a little bit less than 10 minutes, so I will open it to the floor. Abid, raring to go. Come, I'll pass. Okay, sure, yeah.
Maybe a question about the employer side and the importance of formal education when hiring new talent. Do they need to have passed, for example, a 12th grade, or do they need to have a university degree? Is it still part of the conversation, or if they have the skill, it's sufficient enough?
There's a big trend in the industry right now to encourage employers to stop requiring skills, especially even if you think about in the US, trying to help support, again, underserved populations. The only way you're going to do that is by reducing some of the credentials that are required, but it is still a very early emerging trend. So most employers are still requiring very formal credentials for roles. But it's a new push and a new conversation that's happening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe to jump on this one, because we've changed our programming entirely in the Middle East on scholarships. So we started with 4-year bachelor degrees. I think we did 6,000 in the Middle East. And then we switched to TVET, so 2-year degrees, also pushed by the employers, saying, look, we need more high-skilled TVET. Then we went to 3-4 months short, intense courses together with industry and institutes. And I think the latest one we're now doing, and it's actually getting more exciting, but I haven't seen the data yet, is with Google on coding and online skilling of refugee women, and then linking them to their supplier network for jobs. But we don't have yet the data how much % got actually a job. But those are really, I think they're like 8 or 10 weeks or something. So I think the trend I've been seeing is shorter, more focused, starting from the employer. I think that's number one. You know, what are really the needs of the employer? But more and more shorter and focused, rather than longer and academic.
Thanks, Yannick. I think that evolving to match the needs on the ground and how they're changing is definitely what's needed for us to keep up with this issue. Anyone else have a question? Yes, gentleman over here. If Catherine, you could pass the mic for online.
Thank you very much for this amazing lecture. I don't have a question, but I just want to know the opinion of the speakers about this challenge when we speak about the connection with the employer in UK or Europa. What is the difficulties because that have a very effect on the local community, especially when you speak about high skilled human person. So how can we overlap for this challenge for reaching the local employers also, not only in Europe or in America, because it's very harm to the local also community.
Absolutely, brain drain is a thing. Naeem, would you like to take that question of how to also engage local employers?
Of course. So for us, I'm assuming here local employers refers to employers in the Middle East.
Correct, I think.
And that is particularly outside the area of our work, because the center of our solution is using employment to help refugees access a durable solution, so that we enable them to access skilled immigration. What we've tried in the past to engage with local employers is to help them prepare those candidates for this future, by giving them internships or apprenticeships. And in some cases that's been welcomed, but also it was hard for us to justify how this would lead to long-term retention rates. Versus, for example, our retention rates in destination countries are over 93% at this stage. But I think the role of local employers here is really restricted by the challenging governing labor laws that prevent refugees from accessing the job market. Our candidates have relationships with local employers, but they're usually not formalized. So at any point, there's no proof that they are getting paid, which is also challenging from an immigration perspective. But also it poses a risk for our candidates and the employers themselves. So it is a very delicate line between engaging with them and also respecting local laws that prevent refugees from accessing the labor market.
Thanks, Naeem. I think definitely the legal barriers are very real here as well. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Yes, go for it. If I could wait for the mic.
So my question was, you're talking a lot about partnerships between organizations and the private sector. I was curious more specifically, which departments, or where do you find resistance, and where do you find more alliance, or where do you find more people who are willing to help and are willing to go through the change, and where do you find more resistance? I guess this is my question. Is it?
Generally, we found very little resistance if there was an interest. So, for example, in Turkey, they have really problems getting enough workers in agro in the southeast. Not just working in the field, I mean also irrigation or a bit more advanced. And there the companies really lobbied for working permits. They looked with us at where the best training provider would be for the 3 to 6 months courses, and there it went really smooth. So I think if the interests are aligned, and you see the same in the Netherlands, by the way, then suddenly they make special visa available or things are possible. And in Turkey, just to refer to obstacles, that Turkey, of course, is the best example from the region. But there we worked with a group called United Work, and their temp job agency, former staff from the Netherlands and Turkey. And they placed 7,000 Syrians in mostly blue-collar work, at minimum wage at least, which was 15% of what the Turkish government achieved, their state agencies. And that's just a bunch of 3-4 guys and girls, who did that because they started from the needs of the companies. And then they got the permits because the companies were lobbying for them. And so I think it's about finding the interest. And I always like this, of course, to play on the emotion. But I think if the interest aligns, I think it's much more smoother.
Sometimes the interest comes from an individual that's incredibly passionate about helping and supporting, and then can become a catalyst within an organization to push for that. Because you have to align the CSR goals, the corporate social responsibility goals with these type of programs. So that's one. But just one final point I would touch on, there's a big role that communication has to play in achieving these programs as well, and just branding. I touched on this earlier, but it's incredibly important that we start thinking about how you build a brand reputation for a Syrian worker or a Lebanese worker or Jordanian worker, anyone from the region, so that when they come on a platform or when they get presented to a company, the employers think, wow, this is a worker I want to have because they do incredibly well. And so there's also room for nonprofit organizations to think about how are we building that brand with that consistency of training and that experience. And then maybe that becomes then an outlet for the Gulf as well to seek employees from Syria because they're just phenomenal talent. So there's a huge effort there, and then also the communication to employees, potential young people, to think about the type of career paths that they have. And so there's a huge media campaign around that. Just dream of what you could be. Stay in school, keep the education going so you can imagine those possibilities. So there's a huge component of how you brand all of this in communication, both to the youth as well as to the employers as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rania. Mona? Oh, well, don't jump all at once. You know, I only have 1 minute left. Mona?
Very quick question. Is there any observation from your experience on how these initiatives are contributing to gender equality, especially that we are a region that women participation in labor market and is the lowest globally according to statistics. So to what extent our programs are more gender transformative in that direction?
I'll say one thing, then we might have other stats, but for Jusoor in particular, we've been very, very focused on ensuring that we are supporting women in particular. So I think 50% of our scholarships go to women. And so that's been a significant focus for us, but also the board in the early days was very focused on that as a priority. So I think when there's a concerted effort, you can do it. For example, we had a university scholarship program called 100 Syrian Women, 10,000 Syrian Lives, where we marketed to young women that we had a program just for them in all the sciences and the arts and all the most advanced degrees. And so just marketing something like that creates opportunities for women. And then they create examples for each other where they come back and, we've got women now in the top ranks of banks and investment banks and in science. And then they create examples where all these other women look up to them and say, I could be that young person. So I think there's that opportunity, but that's just one experience. I don't know if either of you would add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to also mention, for us, it was in the pilot stages, that wasn't really one of our goals, just because we wanted to prove that skilled immigration can work for refugees. But more recently, that's been intentional for us. But even back then, the natural distribution also came into play. So globally, the female-to-male labor force participation rate is around 67%. For our programs, it's 37%. So for each 100 candidates, 37 are women. And for us, that was an interesting stat because a lot of demand came from tech positions and engineering positions. And our very first candidate to arrive to Australia as an engineer was a woman. So for us, I think it's also about the appetite, and again, to Rania's point about communication. We are very conscious about how we communicate information to the candidates about our programs. These programs are open for everybody from every occupation, and we run continuously campaigns targeting women. And we're seeing this translate into numbers. Eventually, of course, we want these numbers to be higher, but there's also a very promising start that skilled immigration is also one of the areas where women can also be present without having to specify a quota or a portion of these visas for them. But there's also part of the programming that happened with governments. In Australia, for example, there was a program specifically targeting 100 women, similar to Jusoor's, but only for skilled visas. So I think also it has to come from the top. So it's really that fine balance. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Naeem. I think just a stat to share, currently 29%, only 29% of jobs in tech are from women, so that's something to work on. But with our Future Skills project, one of the most encouraging things I heard from one of the girls was she said, I had no idea I could be in robotics. Like, I had no idea there was even a possibility for me, and she was 12 or 13. So I think with Ameer's point, if we start early, then it becomes an actual possibility for them and their families as well. So, and to that, I think we conclude this panel, but thank you to each and every one of you for this inspiration.
Very good.
How's everything?
I need the...
You don't want me to do that?
No, that's fine. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back. And to anyone who did just join either here or online, thank you so much for joining. First of all, I wanted to thank all of our amazing panelists from the employment panel. It was really, really interesting. Some great discussions, some great ideas floated to the future of work, what skills are needed, how to engage with the private sector, and how to break down some of those barriers to employment. So leading on from this discussion, I'm going to give a brief presentation to summarize the research paper we've been putting together at Jusoor to address the fundamental question, how do we incorporate future skills and digital skills into the curriculum in the resource-scarce context of Lebanon? So to address this question, we began collecting data from 4 sources: a literature review of grey literature and academic resources, key informant interviews with organizations implementing these programs or funding these type of programs, 2 focus groups with children participating in our Future Skills program, and an expert survey questionnaire with practitioners in the field, many of whom are sitting here with us today. So thank you so much for participating, and it was great to see your insights. Yes, thank you to everyone who participated. So a little bit of context about Lebanon. In the previous panel, we looked briefly at the dire economic situation in Lebanon and its profound social impact. We also discussed some of the key factors contributing to the high levels of unemployment and underemployment. Our literature highlighted the realities of the impact of these factors. Lebanon's human capital index stands at concerning 52%, which is 10% lower than the MENA region and 13% lower than the OECD average. So to put this in perspective, what this means is if you're a child born in Lebanon today and you are in full health and you receive a full education, you can still only achieve 52% of your potential productivity. So as many of us are acutely aware, the reality is that the majority of the children in Lebanon are far from receiving a complete education. According to the World Bank, a Lebanese child can only expect to receive an average of 6.3 years of schooling, whilst among school-aged refugees, the UNHCR approximates that 30% have never attended school and 37% are not engaged in any kind of work, education, or training. The decline of young people in education indicates that a greater crisis is looming. So we must collectively ensure that the education that they do receive is setting them up for success. So for those who are able to attend school, the Lebanese curriculum is in danger of leaving them ill-prepared for life after school. In the absence of any official update since the 90s, the existing curriculum is disconnected with current market demands. In our practitioner survey, the largest majority of people, 64.7%, chose the option of outdated or irrelevant curricula. Outdated or irrelevant curricula as being one of the top 3 most critical challenges of formal and non-formal education, followed by 47% who cited economic challenges. One key informant emphasized that any effort towards modernization are not currently quick enough to keep up with change that happens in the French baccalaureate or the international baccalaureate, or to keep up with the speed of digital economy. Multiple key informants in our interviews emphasized that the teaching methods themselves must be updated. Reliance on memorization and repetition leaves little room for critical thinking, which, as we know, is a key skill for work and for continued education as well. In our focus groups, students expressed support for this idea, stating that they wanted subjects that involve applied learning or interactive learning and fun activities. They wanted classes such as sports, computer science, multiple non-native languages, creative and fine arts, critical thinking, and financial education, because those are the subjects that they saw as having the greatest relevance and the greatest use in their lives. So to summarize some of our findings, overall, both Syrian refugee adolescents and key experts working in education in Lebanon were aligned in the following recommendations. Firstly, besides traditional literacy and numeracy that have always been prerequisites for employment, digital and soft skills are mandatory to secure meaningful jobs. Secondly, that the current educational system and curricula should be urgently updated to include workplace skills such as problem solving and critical thinking, and they should adopt an application-centered approach rather than a conventional lecture-based one. Thirdly, organizations should not only focus on providing curricula that upskill students, but also on training programs that develop the digital literacy of teachers themselves. And finally, that government action is needed to implement curriculum adaptation and infrastructure changes. So this graph here shows the predictions of the World Economic Forum on the prevalence of skill categories from 2023 to 2027. So within this paper, within the paper that Jusoor is working on, we also allocated skills gaps identified by Lebanese businesses to fit within the categories. So this demonstrates the significance and relevance of these categories in the context of the region. The World Economic Forum also conducted an organization survey which supports the understanding of our key informants and of our other literature, that the most urgent reskilling and upskilling priorities, as you can see here, are analytical thinking, creative thinking, and AI and big data. One key informant also emphasized that soft skills, and specifically social skills, or the ability to build meaningful professional relations, are often overlooked in training programs, but they're equally important to technical skills. The children and the young people that we interviewed in the focus group showed an understanding that both technical and soft skills are needed, but they put a slightly greater emphasis on educational certificates, and also on soft skills such as communication, negotiation, body language, and time management. Our practitioner survey showed that those in the field are very aligned with incorporating the top future skills into education. When asked if they had the opportunity to enhance or incorporate 3 subjects into the education system over the next 5 years to ensure learners access to decent work, 82% chose problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills as one of those options, and 52% chose STEM education. When discussing remote opportunities, our practitioner survey highlighted that there are many potential areas of opportunity, but the most popular was research, including translation and transcribing, ICT and outsourcing, and financial services. Within Lebanon itself, manufacturing and agriculture were identified as key sectors for displaced youth. And then for Lebanese youth, creative industries was the greatest opportunity. Another key area is obviously the proliferation of digital and remote work. So this was reflected in our focus group with a shift in conceptualization of work from being limited to traditional career paths to those that can be established on social media. So promoting one's abilities and talents on social media or on online businesses or freelance platforms such as Fiverr and Upwork. Focus groups showed that students felt that these pathways were more accessible to them because it relies not on education. Despite the majority agreeing that getting an education and attaining a degree is essential for securing a job, some participants highlighted that a school education is not as important or mandatory for employment as before, and the equation of school equals job does not always hold, particularly for vocational jobs, manual labor, and influencer jobs. So we've already spoken a lot about barriers. This graph here was designed by our researcher based on the paper Shibli and Kuzi, and it summarized these 4 categories of barriers. Because of these barriers, they eventually reoriented their project to focus on employment in the informal sector, but our key informants did remain positive about being able to overcome these barriers. Some ideas and suggestions that they have can be seen on the left there. Young people in focus groups also held some degree of optimism. However, children are acutely aware of the barriers that limit them. One in particular asked for help with registration because they knew that without registration, they couldn't access further schooling. It also was slightly dependent on the area that they were being interviewed in. In Jawad, 5 out of 6 of the children in the focus groups thought that they should go abroad for work. Yes, so it's crucial also to acknowledge that true effectiveness and justice in addressing Lebanon's education system and labour market challenges can only be comprehensively achieved if partnered with government-led reforms. We also want to be a little bit cautious of techno-optimism. The literature was highlighting that it can be slightly simplistic in that the barriers that set these people apart in the physical world can also set them apart or set them at the margins of the digital world. As one child was quoted, how can you become a professional coder if you don't have internet access? A lot of these tech jobs can also be poorly paid or poor quality, prone to isolation or alienation. So we just have to be a bit wary of that. Finally, just to give you a brief introduction into our Future Skills project, we use the curriculum given to us by Coffe Break. So for beginner coding and robotics, critical thinking and problem solving, and English language skills. So they emphasize application-based concepts. And I won't go into all of the detail that I had planned to because we're running out of time. And I'm sure we'll talk about it again. But through these innovative activities and games, they are learning to problem solve in everything that they do. They're using English language, and they're learning basic digital literacy as well. We received very positive feedback from this program and saw great improvement in the children who took part. With several talking about a shift in mindset, what Ali touched on earlier, where they're able to see these careers as a reality and as a possibility for them where they couldn't before. So on that note, I'll hand it over to the panel to present the work that they've been doing in these areas. Do we have time for reflections? Yeah, so any reflections from the audience on what we've presented, any ideas that it's sparked? The floor is yours.
Just one idea. You talked about this critical enabler being missing of Wi-Fi. And I wonder if that could be a project where we could get one of the global tech companies involved to try to find ways to create connectivity in these refugee communities, because to the extent we can create an at-scale capability, it can unleash some of the benefit of all the training that's presented here. So just a thought as you shared it and how we can take that back to companies in Silicon Valley to get them involved.
Yeah, very true. And this is why I love panels like this, because we can fuel ideas and follow up on those. So yeah, thank you for that.
If I can be cheeky and also share something, unless someone wants to. I think similarly, I'm also thinking about banking and getting banks with lots of technical, infrastructure to think about how we can also hack that issue, because it's an absolutely fundamental one and seems to be getting worse in terms of access to payment. But I think another thought I have, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier before, is that ultimately moving abroad and also tech is not for everyone. And so how do we think very seriously about reaching those youth? One, from an academic perspective, another hat I wear is that there are more, I think, ivory towers, if you will, who are understanding the need to have Middle Eastern voices be part of the academic research that is coming out. So perhaps one area of potential growth is also in research skills, particularly in Arabic. That is a very valuable skill that not everyone has, and I've spent a decade trying to marginally master. So I think that is an area of growth for those who may not want to leave but can get decent work.
Sure.
Thank you, Catherine. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting findings in there. Well presented. If I could invite all the panelists for the second panel, our education panel. We'll be wrapping up at 6:25. So those of you who are able to stay till 6:25, 6:30, please do. Okay, so the second panel, second in our order, bringing to a close this session on liberated education in crisis contexts, 21st century skills and advancing practical education in crisis contexts. So thank you so much for joining us, distinguished panelists. I will introduce you one by one for your introductions. There is a shot of them individually, if I can keep that on right now. Oh dear, can you pass my phone? That other one actually, the slightly older looking one, yeah. Okay, just to kick off the panel, first of all, I've already said thank you, but I'd like to say thank you very much again to the Asfari Foundation. Thank you for your support of this. We wouldn't be here without you. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Belgian Embassy in Beirut for their support. There are people here today who are connected to the Belgian Embassy in Beirut. Thank you very much for attending. I'd also like to say thank you to the EU delegation in Beirut, because we also wouldn't be here and aligned with the official schedule without their support. So thank you very much to them. Liberated education. Yeah, it's a tough one. We asked this question to our 4 key informant interviews, and I think it means something different to everybody. What does liberated education mean? But I'm going to take a stab at a definition, and this is very much open to all different ranges of perspectives. But I believe that it's to encourage critical thinking, empower students, to make them active in the learning process, put them in the driving seat, give them a creative space to design and explore, and ensure that there isn't a fixed education system that can be changed to being flexible and malleable based on the current context. And I'd very much like to discuss that topic and others on our panel today. All contributions are welcome, and there's several organizations here represented, friends, new friends. Please do add your comments and questions when we get to the Q&A at the end. And there will be a gender theme. Thank you, Mona, for that question. There will be a gender theme as we go through all of our questions. There's no specific question on gender, but if you'd like to touch on that topic, I'd be very happy if you did. Now, by my terrible maths calculations, from the ages of 3 to 18, KG1 to 12 is 15 years. The world 15 years ago looks very different to what we're experiencing today. And what the world is going to look like in 15 years' time, I can't possibly imagine. But if you think about the companies, just the companies that have been founded in the last 15 years, and the jobs and the professions that have been founded, it blows my mind, certainly. Not quite Mailchimp. Mailchimp was 2001, Rania. I had to look that up. A medical device firm that are partners of ours, Shifamed, that was actually formed in 2007. But Uber, 2009. Instagram, 2010. Wise, the bank account, in 2011. Zoom, 2011. All of these companies have come into play in the last 15 years. And I just wonder what the world is going to look like in 15 years' time. Now, that's a traditional education where kids receive the full scale of education that they should receive. under the right to education. Unfortunately, as Catherine's presentation has just shown us, that it's actually more likely that the children in these crisis contexts aren't receiving 15 years, they're receiving 6.3 years, which is terribly sad, and we hope that that will improve over time. So we are actually preparing those kids within 6.3 years of education currently. What would be interesting for us to have as concluding points out of this is, what are those 21st century skills that we'd love to really focus on? We've talked about the top 10 World Economic Forum skills, which I think might be on the next slide. This was part of our survey with our 17 expert practitioners in Lebanon and around the world, and they suggested that analytical thinking, critical thinking, complex problem solving were the top 3 skills for them. But happy for you to define 21st century skills as part of your introduction before you tell us about your program and role and how that can impact the situation. Then also, how can we teach them in Lebanon in these crisis contexts? Is it training? Is it curriculum development? Is it advocacy? Is it institutional changes? And then thirdly, how can we secure sustainable programs in Lebanon? The SDGs, SDG 4 for quality education, and SDG 17. The final part of the act is thinking about a post-chat GPT world. And this is a question from Clem, thanks very much. Really not something that I know much about, but I'm very happy to facilitate that process and conversation. So without further ado, Clem, could I hand it over to you? Let me first just introduce you before I forget. Clementine, may we call you Clem? Okay, Clem. Co-founded Code Brave in 2018, a non-profit organization equipping Lebanon's youth with the tech skills to lift themselves out of poverty. Code Brave is now the leading coding NGO for children in Lebanon and has a social enterprise arm that provides tutoring services to children internationally while employing teachers in Lebanon. Clem speaks on topics related to STEAM education and child-led learning approaches and has been featured in Al Jazeera and The Week UK. Prior to founding Code Brave, Clem worked at the UN as a data analyst, and she holds an MA in Arabic and Persian from Oxford University. Over to you, Clem. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Richard. Very happy to be part of this panel. So, thinking about 21st century skills, we often think about digital skills or tech skills, and that's often where people are moving towards in programming. We must include coding in the curriculum. But really for Code Brave, 21st century skills is a mindset. It's a mindset of adaptability, creativity, and solving problems, leveraging technology to help solve those problems. So the mindset is as important as the technical skills themselves. And why is that? Because the world is moving so fast that really, especially we realized that this year with ChatGPT, that really the future of work has become a kind of moving target. So we can't really say specifically what's the coding language that you're going to need to know in the future. We have to think about teaching skills that will never go out of style, that they're future skills that are really future-proof, and we think of those as adaptability, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, and digital resourcefulness. So the ability to use all the tools out there to solve your problems. ChatGPT being a great example this year. So to give you an example of one of our students, we have a student who was part of our scholarship program called Ahmad. He went through our scholarship program which teaches web development. So he learned foundational programming languages like JavaScript and Python, really key languages. But when he went to his internship that he got linked to as part of the final stage of his Code Brave scholarship at Beirut Digital District, they said to him, we need you to write in Angular, use the framework Angular and write in TypeScript. So imagine turn up to an internship and you've got a completely different thing to do. But because he'd been through this kind of curriculum which teaches the students to say, okay, I can do it, I can learn how to do it, I can use the internet to find out how to do it, I can critically analyze which information to deploy in solving my solution, I can iterate until I find the solution. He could handle it. And that is the kind of mindset we need to be training youth in, not just coding per se. So that's on the mindset front. On the technical skills, the tech skills themselves, we know that the digital world is becoming so dominant in every area of society and industry. And of course it's imperative that that is understood, therefore, and inclusive of everyone. And I think it's even more imperative in the marginalized communities that we're really focusing on today, Because if we don't, the risk is that these communities, without those skills, will kind of compound the inequality that already exists as privileged young people really zoom ahead with things like AI, and the others are left behind. And they're cut off from the huge learning and then work opportunities of the digital world. So that's what we're focusing on at Coffe Break, trying to leapfrog forward a generation and the kind of skills we're teaching and break out of that cycle of poverty. And this is a kind of unique opportunity to do that. We talked a lot in the previous panel about the market demand, which is huge, particularly for Arabic-speaking programmers, which is exciting opportunity, and also the opportunity of remote work. If we can get around those challenges and help people to do so, the opportunity that proposes for particularly people with barriers relating to gender or legal status. So a little bit about what we do at Coffe Break, which I mentioned a bit. We upskill children and youth in Lebanon in tech skills and this 21st century mindset. And we're working with over 1,000 school children this year, 50% girls. And we work with our curriculum. We have over 50 courses, all project-based courses that work towards a final goal or project. A lot of those projects are designed by the students themselves. So anything from agri-tech projects to creating websites about their hobbies. So really trying to foster that natural inquisitiveness of children, which we think is one of the keys to getting great learning outcomes, is that it is really developing that passion, that love of learning. We're also now scaling our impact by training school teachers and sharing our curriculum with organisations we believe are really impactful, like Jusoor's Future Skills programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Clem. That was great. And within 5 minutes as well, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Suha, you're at the end, but you're next. So if you have a microphone down there. Let me introduce you. Suha is the head of Jusoor's refugee education program. She holds an MA in school management and supervision, 35 years of experience in education, starting as an English classroom teacher. Was that Abdulrahman High School?
Yep,
Abdulrahman High School. And 25 years as a school administrator. She worked at a research center in Beirut, where she co-published a paper on widening access to refugee education. She also participated in this research on child rights and civic engagement in public schools in Lebanon. She is a member of several associations, including the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, where she is a member, and she's also part of the INEE Teacher Training Working Group. She's a member of the Lebanon Humanitarian International Forum, LIF, and sits on their steering committee. And most recently, she was awarded the Amnesty International Prize, which I'm happy to say a second time. Well done, Suha.
Thank you. Preparing refugee students to teaching them for the unknown, it's very difficult. Even if you're in a school, public school, private school, but teaching for the unknown is the most difficult thing to do. How do you do it? How do you prepare students for something we don't know what's going to happen? 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we don't know. Creating a new curriculum, it's very difficult. It takes years to create a new curriculum, to adapt one. You have to have sociologists, psychologists, social workers working together to create the new curriculum. And by the time they come up with the new curriculum, it's outdated, especially nowadays with this rapid change. So we need to think about how to teach towards the unknown. And the best way is to teach adaptability. Teach the students how to adapt with the changes that are going on. And the way to do this is, like our friend Clement was saying, teach them critical thinking, teach them a bit of creativity, innovation, and very important, collaboration and communication. Because communication is the key nowadays. How to communicate. You've got all these platforms all over. I'm not very good with IT, but communication is also the key. So we need to incorporate all of these in our education system. Get away from the curriculum that is, basic and outdated. And if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, the innovation creative is at the top. Move that down. Maybe if Bloom comes back to life, nowadays he will change his whole taxonomy and put the one at the top in the middle, because this is what is needed. And so I'm not going to talk much, but I'm just going to say that being adaptable is the best thing for the curriculum and for teaching students for our future skills and towards the unknown.
That's great. Thanks, Suha. Would you mind sharing a little bit on REP?
Yes, sure, of course.
That'd be great.
So when we first started the refugee education program, it was pretty much science, math, English, and Arabic. And then we began to see that this is not what is really needed with our students. We need more to work with them on, and again, we're talking about teaching for the unknown, towards the unknown. So we started incorporating different strategies in our teaching, and one of the most important one was training the teachers. Professional training is very important, but also nothing happens if they don't implement in the classrooms. And they have to be trained towards also future skills. And so we put a lot of work in training our teachers so that they give the best for the students themselves. And that's what we did. All of our teachers are mostly, not all, 97% are Syrian refugees themselves. So we are also empowering them, livelihood, and professionally preparing them to go out there and find jobs. Maybe lately we've got quite a few who have been relocated to Canada and they were able to find jobs. Our students are from, we cover 3-year-olds to 14, 15-year-olds. The early childhood education program started recently in 2017 with Dr. Shan was the hero behind it. And then we also try to send the students mostly back to public schools when we can, because studies have shown if children are not in school by the age of 10, they will never go to school. So our aim is to have them join public schools mostly before they turn 10. We've been successful to a certain degree with doing that. And recently we have added the Future Skills program to our curriculum so that they can also prepare themselves to the future.
I just remembered one other point, Suha, if you wouldn't mind mentioning, that we touched on when we were back in Lebanon, the social cohesion and peace building and the power. Do you think you could touch on that?
Yeah, sure. I was sitting once, in one of our schools, inside the camp, and talking to an 11-year-old girl, and I asked her, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I'm from here, from the camp." And I thought, wow, that's not good. She doesn't know her roots, she doesn't know where she comes from, and she needs to know that she is someone important. She comes from a very, a country that's diverse. True, there's war in the country, but it wasn't the fact. It was the cradle of civilization at one time. So I thought we have to bring in this peace education and identity program into our lessons and teach them more about the importance, the culture in Syria, the diversity in Syria, so that in hope that when they go back, they will rebuild a better future for themselves. And so we incorporated peace education. I don't like to call it peace education because we know that if you teach peace, that doesn't stop war, right? You have to teach them how to solve conflicts in a way where they can communicate. We go back to communication, listen to each other, become more like global citizens if we want to talk about the SGD education part. And now it's part and parcel of our teaching program.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing so much, Suha. Joyce, please allow me to introduce you.
Somewhere on the phone.
Yes, correct. Joyce, over 20 years of experience with global nonprofits to build, engage, and mobilize communities. She ensures cross-community collaboration to work on the real-world challenges that come with connecting people to the opportunities the internet has to offer. In her current role as VP Empowerment and Outreach, she leads the Internet Society's effort to close the skills gap in the internet workforce and to build capacity and knowledge. She serves on the International Section Council of the American Society of Association Executives and has an advisor role for NGOs led by youth and acts as a mentor and coach for young professionals. She's also the past chair of the Equals Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age. On top of all of that, she was also a founding member of the Luxembourg chapter of Women for Cyber Foundation. And in 2023, she was recognized as one of the top 20 women advancing associations. Joyce, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's great to be here, first of all. I want to start with that. I learned a lot from the first panel, so I continue learning from my colleague panels here. Going to your question on the 21st century skills, I think we all agreed, we all talked about it already, that digital skills is basically embedded in everything we do. I mean, whether you look at the health sector, financial sector, education, but also personal life. I have an 11-year-old. It's totally embedded. And so what I see is really critical is that the next generation not only sees that they are consuming information on the internet, but that they become part of the creating of the internet, and that they become part of creating not only digital skills, but also digital opportunities, whilst at the same time being aware of some of the threats that come with that as well. And specifically in the context of refugee and displaced populations, the security issue with digital skills, but also digital presence is very, very, very important. I do think that the other thing that is really important is that as we are building out the internet as an infrastructure, because we don't see it, but it is actually an infrastructure. It has cables and wires, and sometimes we don't realize that while it comes to our wireless phones, there's actually something that needs to be built to make that happen. We also need to make sure that we have people who can maintain that infrastructure. And so the one other thing that I would want to say in terms of skills, and something that Dr. Chen said earlier, is that we should not only think about tech skills. What I would like to add there is that the tech sector does not only need tech skills. And so it is really important that there is a digital world out there that definitely needs tech skills, but that not only need techies. I'm not a techie, by the way. Maybe just a few words about the Internet Society, Richard, may I?
Sure.
So the vision of the Internet Society is the Internet for everyone. We're still quite a bit away from that, as 2.7 billion people still are not connected to the internet, so we still have quite a bit of work to do. And so what the Internet Society does is that we look at not only what the internet brings, but also mostly at what the opportunities are that the internet can bring to people. So one of the things that we want to do is that we actually want to reach the communities that are the hardest to reach, that where the private sector doesn't see a commercial interest to actually bring that connectivity. And I'm talking about rural communities, I'm talking about hardest to reach, whether it's related to their circumstances, but also to geographical reach. So the other thing that we look at the Internet Society is strengthening the internet, and that is more focusing on security issues. It's more the technical security, so it's making sure that routing security is done, that encryption is part of, end-to-end encryption is part of the design of things. And so as part of all of these things that we do, we actually created empowerment programs. The organization has been existing for over 30 years. And since the beginning, training and skills development, capacity building in the broader sense has been critical to everything we do. And so currently I have the honor and the pleasure of leading an amazing team that does training, e-learning, and then fellowship programs. And as part of that, we train now, we started training people in person again. So we are actually training people on designing, deploying computer networks to provide them with the skills, combining it with an internship program so that they have access to employment. So this is where the connection between employment and education is really, really critical. One does not happen without the other. I'll pause here. I see Richard is
That's fantastic. No, that's perfect timing, actually. Thank you. Next up is Samar. Samar Moussa is a data enthusiast. I really like that. She's a Jusoor UAB scholar, which is the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, studying a master's degree in modeling for science and engineering in the specialization of data science. She has a bachelor's degree in informatics engineering, in software engineering and information systems from Tishreen University in Syria, and more than 3 years' experience in client and customer technical and help desk support for remote companies. You're really interested in human-computer interaction and increasing technical awareness through mentoring, which is great. And you've also been volunteering with several organizations to increase awareness around scholarships and also technical expertise to bridge the gap between technical and non-technical parties. Over to you, Samar.
Thank you so much, Richard, and I want to thank the audience and thank you for Jusoor for providing me with the opportunity to be able to speak here in front of you. When I want to think about the question that Richard asked about the 21st century skill set, I would like to go back to an example since I had a volunteering experience with an initiative called Teens in AI. It was previously back in October 2021. I was a tech mentor, one of the very few tech mentors that were supervising a group of lovely teenagers from elementary and middle and high school. They were all enthusiastic about the chances of developing an idea. So once I want to talk about the 21st century skills, the first thing that comes into my mind is curiosity. Nurturing curiosity. So once a child or once a teenager has an idea, we should encourage them. Okay, how you're gonna develop this idea, how you're gonna create a business out of it. Not a business, at least a project that they enjoy, that they wanna create an application or a web app for something that they really believe in. Nurturing curiosity is, in my opinion, one of the most important skill sets that allows anyone at a young age be able to be a problem solver, which is the foundation or the base of being a successful, let's say, software engineer or anybody who's working in tech. So even if for the unfortunate Syrian refugees who are living in Lebanon, just to provide them with the chance that they can have an idea, believe in it, have somebody supporting them that, okay, you can work on this idea, and helping them step by step to be able to develop it into a project or develop it into something that can actually make profit of in the future if they continue it in a career path in tech. So this is the first thing, curiosity. And the second thing is problem solving, which is on a higher level, basically after nurturing curiosity in a organized way. And after that, which critical thinking, asking yourself also why would I do that? Which is the better approach? How I'm gonna solve this issue with the best timing or less cost. I think it's, So, and now there are a lot of AI tools and AI implemented programs, and I think Jusoor's curriculum also implementing a lot of great things on technology and the latest technologies. And now we are at the era of generative AI, so it's worth mentioning that we need to nurture more about how to use AI tools, LM models, and these advanced tools into creating a better future for these children. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Samar, for sharing that. Our last, but certainly not least, panelist to introduce themselves, Abdulrahman. Abdulrahman Al-Halawani is an accomplished program manager with a strong background in addressing social challenges in the Levant and UK. Currently serving as the Director of Programs and Innovation at the Asfari Foundation, Abid leads initiatives through grant-making, innovation, and partnerships to maximize social impact. He has experience at Care International, supporting refugee minorities in Jordan. He also holds an MA in Sustainable International Development, specializing in gender and development, from Brandeis University, as well as 2 additional degrees in NGO management. Abid, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting me for the panel, and we're very proud of this partnership of the Asfari Foundation. It's also very hard to come last after a series of very informative panels and experts working in the field. So I think my 2 cents will be more or less a summary of what has been discussed from what I've heard from everyone else. I'm going to take us first on a macro level, maybe to scare us a little bit as people working as well. So referencing the World Economic Forum that was mentioned in the research, it's expected that within the coming 5 years, around 50% of the labor market requires reskilling. 44% of the core skills that we'll be using in the coming 5 years will change. So around half of our day and what we do in our day technically will change. This research that they do every 2 years, and they survey 800 companies, employing 11 million individuals, covering 27 sectors and 45 geographies. But the main driver that many of the 85% of the respondents said it's going to be technology transformation within those companies. This is with the technological advancements and with AI coming into the picture now, research shows around 69 million jobs will be created as this new evolution happening, but in return around 83 million jobs will be eliminated. And this is a different, it's new in history, because previously when technology were introduced to labor markets, they eliminate jobs, but they create more jobs in the future. But now with the introduction of AI, the fear is that it might eliminate more jobs than add. But here is not to kind of scare people around AI, but to imagine a future different than the one that we live in at the moment. Maybe potentially we don't have to work 5 days a week or something like that, or the productivity that we have will change. We'll have longer weekends finally. So yeah, and some of the areas that there will be more jobs in the future relate to artificial intelligence, new forms of energy, environmental management technology, cybersecurity, as you were saying as well. So these are opportunities that we can focus on, for example, if we're thinking about employment in general. And this is a global snapshot. And at the same time, education, they anticipate in this decade students graduating from the university, by the time they graduate, a third of their skills will be obsolete. So the education systems are unable to keep up with the changes that are happening in the world of work. Neither are us humans mentally, I think. It's happening at a pace that is really fast. But all of this is happening at different paces in different regions, to acknowledge that, maybe faster in developed economies than other economies. But imagine, multiply the situation by 10 in our region, for example, and multiply it by another 10 for refugees specifically and the challenges that they will face, and another 10 for women specifically when they want to access a labor market, especially refugee women. So I understand the issue of techno-optimism specifically, but it also, it's a global issue happening for everyone and will have effects on refugees as well. Taking us a little bit to the local level, focusing on Lebanon specifically, I attended a conference last week where someone said governments have interests, they don't have principles. And we all know the interests of the Lebanese government when it comes to refugees in general, and especially with education. They're not seen as an opportunity, they're seen as a risk. There's a lot of challenges for education, as we know, when it comes to access and quality and all of that. And refugees are used as scapegoats sometimes when it comes to different things. But they still receive a significant amount of funding from different donors, where it could be managed more effectively and efficiently by other actors, like the one here we have in the table, the one we have in the room, and it kind of emphasized the idea that the third sector or like development organizations continue to carry the burden when it comes to filling that gap specifically, and more investment needs to be put into that place, and eliminate the layers, as Yannick was saying in the previous panel, of middle kind of contractors between donors and local organizations. So focus on localization as well. And then look at the individual level. We've heard a lot about kind of 30% of children are out of education, 37 are not engaged in any activity. There's a loss of hope in general in the region, specifically among refugees. And we've heard the testimony from Naeem that given an opportunity that they can have the prospect of being connected to a global job or a job somewhere can instill that hope. And all of the 21st century skills, whether it be focusing on resilience or active learning or creativity, they support learners to be future-proof. And I think the two skills that I would focus on is innovation and active learning. Because within innovation, you have to experiment, you have to prototype, you have to fail, you have to learn, and you have to seek information from different people. And they kind of build a skill set in the background as well. So yeah, like our conversation here is to reimagine education and liberate it in general. And liberation to us at the Asfari Foundation means liberate it from national systems that constrain it. Think about linking individuals and their aspirations and their skills, bypassing political governments, whatever agendas they have, into connecting them into global opportunities. And I'll pause here. But one more comment to say is that we're talking about all of this, but it doesn't happen on its own. There's a lot of education system in the background that is required, a lot of literacy programming that is required, a lot of advocacy that is required, and we are aware of that and understand that. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Abid. I really appreciate that contribution, and also for adding to the definition of liberated education. We're going to run out of time. So we're going to make a kind of executive decision of we're going to cut the first question. Sorry. And we're going to go straight on to the second question, which I think will probably allow us to have something a bit more specific, maybe with some solutions. The first question was a little bit more general. So as you can see there on the screen, the second question around EdTech hubs. EdTech hubs, defined by being a school or an education center in a neighborhood or a city or a region that would be invested in and potentially be able to offer the latest technologies for teachers and students to use in the classroom or maker space. The facility will not only be available for their own students, but actively promoted and offered at a reasonable rate, or preferably pro bono, for other students in the area to access, learn, and enjoy. If several of these regional hubs were established, it could take dozens across the country of Lebanon. Then potentially the majority of students in the country would at least be able to access this technology despite not having the resources individually or through their school. Do we agree or disagree? Joyce, could I hand over to you?
I'll say we agree just for the fun of it, right? Yeah. No, I think my short answer is yes. I think EdTech hubs in the context of having a space where people can access technology, and we talked about earlier, is that connectivity is obviously the first step to things, and often in remote areas or in camps or in areas with underserved populations, there is no connectivity. And so having a hub where people can actually go to and actually play with the tools, because that's ultimately it, is definitely going to help. Now, I would caveat it, because I would say that it requires training, so just putting up the hubs and just hoping for the best is not going to change anything. And doing one training at a time is also not going to help. So one of the programs that we piloted last year in Zimbabwe is a train-the-trainer program where we worked with universities and TVET institutions to train teachers on the designing and deploying computer networks. This was just one of the trainings that we offer, but and so we ran this program in a school, and it was kind of a hybrid format where they did part of it online. They then came together for 1 week to really get the hands-on training where they literally plugged the cables, they connected to a server, they connected to computers, they connected to the router and made sure that the router was secure. I mean, so they really had a very hands-on experience. And so they then went back to their universities to teach on their turn to their students. So through 16 teachers that we trained last November, they now reached 1,031 students in their own universities and TVET institutions. And so the one challenge that we've seen there is that the students in the schools could actually not access our curriculum online because they didn't have connectivity, or they had electricity issues, whichever, or both, or they didn't have enough computers. So being able to bring them to a place where they actually can access that, and where they can also look at having that hands-on experience to develop their skills is really going to help. The one thing that I would caveat, maybe just one example on who knows, potential partner maybe for Lebanon. What we've, in talking to a number of partners of the Internet Society, we talked to American Tower. And American Tower has done something similar, where at the base of the tower, so to actually connect communities, you need these big towers that you see with, the Wi-Fi connections and other things that I don't understand attached to the towers. But so what they did is that they go out to quite remote areas to build the towers, to allow for connectivity to go to even further remote communities, but they often don't have the equipment. So they brought in containers, shipping containers, that they plugged at the base of their towers, which has electricity, which has connectivity. And so they work with partners to equip those containers with computers. They train some trainers or teachers to come into those containers to then train the local community in how to actually use the technology. Not only that, if we can then train the community on how to expand connectivity to their communities, you really have a double win. So if you can train students to look at deploying and designing computer networks that they can then actually deploy in their own communities, connecting to that tower that is not that far away, then they can actually deploy connectivity in their own community. So that is something that, an example of these EdTech hubs, that they call them digital training centers, but all the same. So it actually works. And so they work globally, and they see that it benefits the whole community, where they see e-businesses bloom, they see education come up. So it actually does work. One issue I just wanted to flag is a gender issue.
Okay, yep.
Since
gender,
you asked.
yeah, gender, yep, that's fine.
Is that when you set up tech hubs or hubs of any sorts, what we've heard from our communities is that depending on the culture, it's hard for women to actually go to those centers. One is that the travel to the centers can be dangerous. They may, in some cases, not be allowed to travel to those centers. So security is also an issue for them. And then the other thing is that if they go to those centers, they may have to mingle with men, which in some contexts is also challenging. So that's just one caveat I wanted to add in the context of those hubs.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. Thanks, Joyce, for sharing so much. That international perspective is great. And we also have other people working in international education in Africa in the room. So Afrodidact, if you would like to contribute during the Q&A, we'd be very happy to hear your voice. Clem, I'm going to ask you almost an impossible task, but I'm going to move on to question 3. But if you did have any extra elements to add to question 2 from a gender perspective, that would be great. And then if you can bridge into question 3, sure. Possible? Question 3 is around sustainability and how we can bring more sustainability to the programs. And I believe that you wanted to tell us about the Tech Working Group.
Yes. So on the gender point with EdTech Regional Hubs, agree. And I think at the younger level, what we find is that about sort of 11, 12, you don't actually, according to our data, get that much difference in student and female students opting out as you do at the older level. So by about 15, that's the point where girls start being like, oh, tech isn't for me, it's for boys. So that could be something to consider with these EdTech Regional Hubs, if it's going to be an optional activity, how to make sure it's actually still inclusive. On the sustainability point, various levels of how we can talk about sustainability. So there's the financial element, and then also thinking about how we can have strategic partnerships to ensure sustainability of programs. On the financial side, we really believe in social enterprise and would really encourage programs to try and implement, where possible, some kind of self-funding mechanism. So at Coffe Break, we sell coding tutoring, live online coding tutorials to clients internationally, children aged 5 to 18, mainly in the UK and UAE. And we use the profits from that to fund our program in Lebanon in part. So it's a one-for-one model. So every time you buy a class, you fund a class for a child in Lebanon. And I think that's something that the NGO community, the international development world, needs to move towards. I'm seeing at the moment a lot of support actually in Lebanon and investment for NGOs or social enterprises to build up that revenue generation model. So that's really good to see. And I think a lot of NGOs already have existing skills and capabilities that can be monetized. So it's great. And then in terms of strategic partnerships, Richard, we mentioned we're part of we've formed with others working in the tech upskilling space in Lebanon, a tech working group, which is looking at facilitating collaboration, mapping out who's there, avoiding duplication. Also, for students saying, okay, what's the pathway? If you're at Coffe Break now, where are the other opportunities you can move on to? And also something I think Rania mentioned earlier, working on brand Lebanon. Encouraging international employers to see the talent within Lebanon as viable for employment. So I think that's how we achieve long-term sustainable change, is acknowledging that we're not going to achieve this alone. We are much better working together as an ecosystem.
Excellent. Thanks so much. You did the impossible task. You made it seem very possible, actually. Abid, can I ask you to talk about a little bit on incorporating AI and also your point around self-paced programs online? Yes, I think that'd be great.
It's related to the sustainability element. We look at the sustainability in operations, programmatic, and impact. An area of, that you can invest in to sustain the programs operationally is to use pro bono services from different companies, locally, internationally. Programmatic and impact is developing online platforms or online programs that participants can access at a self-paced to start with, to build basic skills, soft skills, et cetera, and then they can join more specialized programs with the support of, for example, tech hubs. But the thing also on tech hubs is issues of accessibility and scale, and that's where AI comes into place. It's a hot topic at the moment, and the UNESCO published a research in 2019 that talks about the advantages of incorporating AI in education, and they found 3 different opportunities. One on education management, 2 is on learning and assessment for children or students, and the 3rd is on empowering teachers and improving education. The first one could be a simple example as content creation, which I know is a big problem. Now AI can spit out content, for example, case studies, lesson plans, whatever you need. And it's still nascent, we know, but in the coming years it can improve. When it comes to learning and assessment, there is the nexus between education and behavioral science and artificial intelligence. How to nudge students to learn more, like using techniques that's used in Facebook or Instagram that pulls us in. How can we use those behavioral insights to focus on education? And that's also part of artificial intelligence. And the last one is empowering teachers and enhancing teaching. Lessons that can support teachers with lesson plans, and also case studies, icebreakers. It can nudge the teacher if a student needs support, and all of that. And for the students as well, it could be part of personalization. It could have a personalized journey for each student. And for education management, it could support with macro-level data. All AI is based on statistical models. So it can tell you, for example, this region in Lebanon is really good at this area, but needs support in that area. And therefore, it can support with decision-making about why and how can you improve that in the future. The report is out in 2019, and there has been a lot of advancement since then. But just to think about AI as a way to support us as organizations or implementers in the field, to save resources on operations, to support with programmatic and impact sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abid. Suha, could you give us 1 minute on our award-winning Azima?
Yes, my pleasure. Just want to add one quick point that all of this IA and technology, we must not forget. IA, see, there you have it. My technology stops there. But we must not forget the well-being of the teachers, number 1. Psychosocial well-being, emotional well-being, livelihood, because they are the ones who are going to be giving the students the opportunity to learn. So this is, for me, a priority, actually, coming from an anthropology and sociology background, I suppose, and, of course, the children's well-being. So we must not forget that, can I go and say it correctly this time, AI? we need to also work on their social skills. They need to enhance their fine motor skills, their gross motor skills, that they need to play, they need to fight, they need to solve their problems when they fight together, and use their fine motor skills to be able to succeed. So these are as important as the technology. So sorry, I had to say this. This is my,
very welcome,
my other part. Yeah, so during COVID, we devised the teaching strategy through teaching through the WhatsApp, because all the parents have phones and all of them have WhatsApp. It's the thing, I mean, especially in Lebanon, those of you who know Lebanon well. And so we devised a teaching tool through WhatsApp. Teachers would send the lessons to the students, either a short video or a worksheet that we take a picture of the worksheet, send it to the students. Students then solve it on the screen itself, take a screenshot of it and send it back to the teachers, who would then comment and send it back to the students. It was very successful because the parents were learning with the children, and this is very important, parent awareness, and they really need it. So we were indirectly also teaching the parents. So immediately when we found that we incorporated awareness sessions for the parents within the Azima program. And it really bridged the gap. A lot of our students who went back to school after Azima to the public schools were, well, I don't like to say skipped a class. I don't like skipping classes, but that's what happened in our traditional, if you want, education system, because they were learning online and they were able to catch up with the classes. So what we've done now, we won an award for that. We are using the same system for the students who cannot go to school, because they're either working, so they can do that program after they come home after their work, or they are, we have some who are sadly wheelchair users, so there's no access to school, so they are also learning through this application. And we have some girls, speaking of gender, who do not go to school because they have to babysit their younger siblings, and so they are continuing their education through Azima. So this is, we hope that we will, keep this up and maybe upscale it very soon, hopefully, if we get the funds.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, always very important. Yeah, no pressure. Thanks, Suha. We've got good friends. We've got good friends. The last question, if you don't mind switching it on to our post-chat TPT world. We've only got time for one comment. Samar, I'm very happy to hand it over to you. As someone actively studying this right now, I think it's fascinating to learn 2 minutes from you, and then we're going to have a few minutes for audience questions.
Of course. Thank you so much. We're living in a data world now. Data is the fuel of every single model that has been built for now. So the story started with machine learning, and then a lot of other models has been built. Now we're at the era of generative AI, basically. One of the models are called LLM models, which is a shortcut for large language models, which means that these are type of artificial intelligence models that can create a human-like text. They can imitate the human text. It's like you're chatting with somebody. It's a very advanced topic now at the moment. And I know that ChatGPT, I think most of us now has used it at some point. ChatGPT is built on LLM models, and I know that nowadays we can use ChatGPT to for students and for learners and for educators. I think it can be used to track the pattern, how you solve a problem. You can save actually the chat that you're having with ChatGPT, and it will create a title depending on the content that you're having. And based on that, you can actually track the progress. If your child or if your student is learning something, you can track how they solve a problem, how they think, what are their whys, what are their problems, and this will increase critical thinking, productivity, better performance. So basically, they will have, for curious minds like me, it would be like a really nice innovation that can help you have a lot of answers to many questions. For researchers as well, it's feeding curiosity. Like for sometimes, for me, sometimes instead of spending a lot of hours on Stack Overflow to see why this error or why this bug is happening, like ChatGPT can simply tell you this error has happened because of that, and you can, instead of spending hours reading in the documentation, you can just simply have your answer ready and then move on the other topic, which means increasing productivity. So basically, by tracking the chat, by analyzing how a person thinks, it will create a better opportunity for a child or for a learner having access to ChatGPT to have better skill set in terms of critical thinking, curiosity, problem solving, which are, as I said before, the main foundation and the main skill set that needs to create a successful student in the future, and also a successful person, individual, capable of handling themselves strongly. So.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing your experience. Yeah, fascinating actually, and I think we could all learn a lot from you, Samar. Certainly when we were talking to you about AI and LLMs and all the other acronyms. I'm happy to learn from you, Samar. Maybe time for one question, two questions from the audience. If you do, I could take a question and hand it straight to one of the panelists, if you would like. Yeah, Shane.
Yes, so thank you everyone also for inviting us. So we in Gambia since 6 years are also implementing computer classes, but we take an approach where we want to be at the most remote area possible. So we use Raspberry Pis and we connect them to second-hand monitors and no parts are moving. And I wanted to just use the ChatGPT as a case. To have some analogs, because very interesting about ChatGPT or this kind of technology is that it is probabilistic. It's not deterministic. So always you need to have strong domain knowledge if you get an answer to know if it's right. Because to me it's always apologizing. I say that's not true. Right. Yeah, sorry, that's not true.
Right.
And then,
are you happy to?
Then the second part, I think you need first principles reasoning to be a prompt engineer, to know what matters, what do I know, that's the context. And I think towards this discussion, I think you need curriculum, but many things, like some things you really need to know through curriculum, but I also organize here called a Dojo club, and there it's constructivistic. So we are volunteers, it's open for everyone they ask questions and they try whatever they want. I think we need to do this more and more as there's so much technology, we don't know it yet. So I was wondering how you think also regarding these edtech hubs, how do you reach the most remote areas? Because I think, again, there's a big chance they end up in the city, or like, how do you break up this inequality algorithm?
Yeah. Yeah. Would you like to comment a little bit? I know it's several parts. Comment on what you feel comfortable.
I mean, I'd love to comment on the first part, because I think it's a really interesting point you're making about, we get asked this a lot now, is, okay, well, ChatGPT can generate code. You can get it to write a website for you. Why are you even teaching code now? And our answer is that we really can't just skip forward straight to teaching young people how to prompt an AI. Because if you do that, we're working in contexts where the existing level of education of children is low. And they actually need to go through building their own cognitive skills and building their brain power to solve problems, to think logically and sequentially and conditionally, so that they can actually take advantage of the power of AI and use it effectively. And like you say, query it. But even if, as AI, gets more and more powerful and is maybe making less mistakes, we still need to build into the actual cognitive abilities of young people. We can't just skip that bit out. So yeah, I think that's the main bit I was in terms of working in remote areas. Coffe Break works in relatively remote areas, but not, I don't think, as remote as you're working in Gambia. And it's really interesting your approach with Raspberry Pis. I think it's something that needs to be implemented more as like a low resource solution. Certainly we have a lot of issues, it's our kind of bread and butter of dealing with internet challenges. But in Lebanon, for example, there are ways around this. We use a lot of 3G dongles. So to get around the Wi-Fi, we always trying to have plan A, B, and C for the internet. Often, Alpha, MTC, if you're familiar with the networks in Lebanon, and then Wi-Fi. So you always have that, again, it's a kind of problem-solving approach that we come to those kind of challenges with. But yeah, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
That's okay. If I could just say we are at 6:30, so our time's up. I mean, if everyone's comfortable and you're not too hot, should we continue for 5 minutes? Why don't you go for a minute, Joyce, and then we'll try to wrap up. Yeah, that's okay.
So,
sorry, I don't mean to be a hard taskmaster here. You guys are welcome to have your evening, but...
the way we have reached, we actually just have a project on the Everest right now. So it's actually 2 villages on the Everest. This is 2 highest villages that we've ever connected to the internet. And so we've done it through community networks. And so it's basically looking at Wi-Fi or mesh connectivities. And don't press me too much on the technical pieces. I am more than happy to connect you with the people who know all about it. But so basically it's through working with the community at local level, working with the ISPs, and then actually making sure that there's an access to the backbone as well. So building community networks by the community for the community. So looking at sustainability as well in the long term so they can manage it. But happy to share much more.
Great, thanks for that question, Shane. That was fantastic. I'm sorry, that's our only moderated question that we're going to have time for. If I'm able to conclude, I feel that we covered several of the 21st century skills. I noted down mindset, communication, not just tech, which I think is important, Joyce, curiosity and problem solving. We talked about the EdTech hubs, and I think that's an ongoing question and conversation that we can have either after this session or virtually. Train the trainer, the integrated approach to having that content integrated into the curriculum, and be careful of gender. The tech working group and collaboration with that, I think that's very important, as well as brand Lebanon. Yeah, and I think that's an important point that Rania made in terms of brand Syria, brand Syrian Refugees, brand Lebanon. I think that is important. And then, of course, incorporating AI and how do we do that? And if it's EdTech hubs, how do we do that as well? And I think we can learn from each other. Next steps, I think they're open to discussion, but we would certainly like to be at the CIES conference in Miami in March 2024. It's the Comparative International Education Society. Thanks. Where we'd like to be continuing this research and developing that and presenting at that organization in March. And I think that research is through our work, but also the collaborative spirit. We'd very much like this to be a part of, in partnership. If anyone would like to be part of that research, then please do let us know. And I was really overjoyed when Rania said about the global tech companies in Silicon Valley and how they might be able to galvanize Wi-Fi technology for Lebanon. I mean, what a dream. And I think she's left us now, but she is the CEO of Mailchimp, so we'll follow up with Rania on that and see where we can go. I appreciate that it's not easy, and Joyce, we've talked about it as well. If you're able to move on to the final slide, I think there's closing steps and wrap up. So yeah, I've done most of that. Please keep in touch. We will share the final research paper in July, and a lot of the learning from this, Mary, thank you very much, is incorporating that into the research paper. And Catherine's email is there at the bottom. Please do keep in touch with Catherine. Please do keep in touch with all of us. We're very happy. So thanks for a nice session. If you would like to continue the discussion, then I'll be having a drink after this, and you're very welcome to join me. So, thank you.